Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, with the Republicans in complete control of government, the White House, the House of Representatives, the Senate, they just decided to shut down the federal government. You know, as a federal government employee for 3 decades, I lived through plenty of federal government shutdowns, and I know what it looks like from the inside. I know how it impacts the public servants and our families, the people who, even through a federal government shutdown, are doing the hard work of the American people. But I am not a political expert or pundit. I've never even tried to play one on TV, but I know somebody who is. Brian Tyler Cohen. Now, you may have seen Brian and I do legal analysis work together. We do what's called the legal breakdown. We do about 5 or 6 legal analysis videos every week. They post on Brian's channel. And I've come to know Brian over the years as a true expert in all things political. So I turned to him because I wanted to get his take on the implications and the consequences of this Republican federal government shutdown. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Brian Tyler Cohen.
With that, let's get going. Brian, thanks for jumping on our Substack Live here.
Thanks for having me. I was going to say for the pitch for Legal Breakdown, you all don't have to watch all 604, but as close to it as you can get.
Yeah. Okay, so the reason I wanted to bring Brian on is because we are now on the verge of a federal government shutdown. So what I know about federal government shutdowns is what happens to federal government employees, because I lived through 7 of them. And I'll talk along the way a little bit about what that means for public servants, for people inside government. But what I'm, I think, most keenly interested in and why I brought Brian on is because he is a true political expert. You can't do any better than his assessment of the political landscape. And he's pretty good at sort of projecting out what the political implications are of, any particular development. So let's assume that they can't reach a compromise tonight. That's the way it's looking. And as of, I guess, tomorrow, the federal government shuts down. Now, recognizing that the Republicans have the White House, the House, and the Senate, do you think the Dems are going to be able to message that this is a Republican shutdown? How do you see this playing out politically?
So there's been polling from a raft of different firms, Navigator, Morning Consult, about 7 different firms. All of them show that the vast majority of the blame would fall onto Republicans for doing this. But look, I think that the Democrats are actually smart to make their red line here that they want ACA subsidies extended. This is a Republican Party that has shown they are nothing if not hostile to healthcare. They've just stripped 17 million Americans of Medicaid and eliminated these ACA subsidies in this one big beautiful bill moving forward. So healthcare premiums are going to rise 75 to 100%. So the one point of leverage that Democrats wanted to use, because this is not done through reconciliation. This is a continuing resolution. So you need 60 votes in the Senate to be able to pass it. So you need some Democratic votes. Democrats said, okay, we'll sign on to this thing, but we need to make sure that we can extend ACA subsidies. That is a obvious move, a popular move, and by the way, a move that is going to disproportionately help Republicans, because since 2020, the states that have seen the vast majority of growth in ACA subsidy, in ACA enrollment are Republican states. It's West Virginia, Tennessee, Texas, and so all of the states that have seen the largest amount of growth are states that voted for Trump in 2024. And Republicans right here, they are staking their reputation here on this idea that, okay, what the Democrats want is healthcare for illegal immigrants. That's what they're saying. Even though the truth of the situation is not a single dime of ACA subsidies goes to undocumented immigrants. So that's a complete lie. And Republicans are just so hell-bent on making sure that they can rip healthcare away from Americans so that Americans don't have affordable healthcare, whether it's 17 million Americans who rely on Medicaid or 20 million Americans who don't want to see their premiums rise 60, 70, 80, 90, 100%. After this shutdown, Republicans do not care because healthcare is an issue that doesn't matter to them. It doesn't matter to them, and they need some way to offset this hole that they're going to blow in the deficit because they wanted to give themselves tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. And the way that they found to do that is just to take healthcare away from people. So they're not going to relent because they need some way to offset these massive costs. And healthcare is just an easy way to do it. And they're wealthy enough that it doesn't really impact them.
So you think this will work to the detriment of the Republicans?
Look, I mean, the reality is everybody loses in a shutdown. I think it's smart for Democrats to be able to say that our red line here is extending these ACA subsidies that benefit both Democrats and Republicans across the country. It's another story entirely if Democrats are going to have the ability to actually message this thing. We've seen that Democrats leave a lot to be desired when it comes to effectively messaging the base or this country. And meanwhile, you've got a Republican propaganda machine that hums along 24 hours a day, where they can spew these lies like what the Democrats want is to fund undocumented immigrants getting health care, when there's not an ounce of truth to that. But no one on right-wing media is going to correct Donald Trump. Nobody in the Republican base is going to correct Donald Trump. I just came off of News Nation where I was debating Mick Mulvaney. Mick Mulvaney is his former Office of Management and Budget director from his first term. Even he wouldn't say on air, wouldn't concede on air the objective reality that not a dime from ACA subsidies goes to undocumented immigrants. So these people are going to keep up the con as long as they can. And when you're dealing with a Republican Party for whom shame doesn't exist, it's going to be very difficult to message. And look, I think that's the importance of what we're doing right now, talking to everybody who's tuning into this. I think that's the importance of your channel and making sure that people can get the truth of the situation. It's what I try to do on my channels on a daily basis. But it's going to take a major effort from those of us who are actually have some adherence to facts and reality to get the truth out, because Republicans are shameless in their ability to lie.
So let me shift from the political to the practical for a minute and just give people some inside baseball about, what actually happens to federal government employees when the government shuts down. First of all, the federal government doesn't really completely shut down because essential services, and that's the buzz term, continue on even during a government shutdown. Of course, the reality is, guess what? We don't get paid during the shutdown. So we are there working for free. Now, ordinarily, we will get our back pay when a funding bill goes through, but it's not a guarantee. So here's what happens. So essential services are things like federal police agencies, the courts, prosecutors, criminal defense attorneys who are on the government dime, like the Federal Public Defender Service. These are essential agencies. Now, obviously, kind of DOJ and criminal law is my bailiwick. I'm not exactly sure what happens with the EPA or, other agencies or organizations. But here's what I can tell you. They go from agency to agency and they ask the leadership of each agency to designate which employees are essential and which employees are not essential. When I was a supervisor, the chief of homicide, I found it particularly offensive that we would go through the U.S. Attorney's Office and actually designate some employees not essential, but thank you for your public service. We could do without your, it was offensive. It was demeaning. And, but that was the reality. So the game that most agency heads would play is they tried to designate as many employees as essential as possible to, keep their people getting their government salary. So the reality is a government shutdown isn't really a full government shutdown. But let me ask you this. I have seen some reporting that Trump is now threatening, mass firings if there is a government shutdown. I've seen some of the unions that represent public government employees saying, yeah, Well, that wouldn't be lawful. When has
That's
that stopped Donald Trump?
exactly.
Right? But
And
what's your take on the prospect of mass firings and how that could, impact the political calculus?
he's going to use anything as a pretext to be able to do that. If he sees that Congress is not in session and that he has as if he would use Congress as a barrier anyway, as if he would view Congress as an obstacle. But if there is no Congress in session, then of course he's going to barrel ahead. And you know what? In large part, the Supreme Court has agreed with him in instance after instance. And so if he views this as kind of his runway to be able to do that, then he will take this opportunity to fire people by the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. And adding to the point that you made before, where he'll go agency by agency, he's not going to ask the agency heads who they deem essential. He's going to deem who he thinks is essential based on his own political beliefs. And so he's going to make sure that every, ICE agent stays funded. He's going to make sure that nobody at the EPA is funded. Nobody at the VA is funded. And he's going to use this as a way to shoehorn through the political agenda that he's wanted to see shoehorn through. But now he recognizes he has got a clear runway to do that because there's nobody standing in his way. And moreover, beyond that, you'd mentioned the folks who are going to have to work without pay. Think about how that's going to present itself with TSA agents, for example. They are essential personnel, so they'll be able to continue working, but they're not going to get paid. And so a lot of them are going to call out because most people don't want to show up to work if they're not getting a paycheck. Think about the way in which that's going to manifest itself in airport delays. We're going to have 1.3 million active military members who are not going to get paid, all thanks to the guy who claims that he's the best friend to the men and women of the troops. We're going to have 750,000 government workers, 725,000 civilian workers. So there are beyond millions of people who are going to be impacted by this, not just who collect a government paycheck, but also who rely on government services to just fulfill their everyday lives. And all of that is going to be impacted. And all of this could be mitigated if only Donald Trump would relent on the smallest olive branch that Democrats are seeking to extend, which is to just deign to allow Americans to keep their health care at the same cost that it is right now, as opposed to seeing those health care costs double.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump's thinking is keep them sick, keep them weak. You can control them more easily. They can't fight back. They can't rise up. They can't march, protest, and rally in the kind of numbers that we need to topple a dictator. And I think he's a sadist. I really do think he gets off on the suffering of others. So let me ask you this. What do you think is the smartest political play for the Dems right now?
Well, I think right now it is smart to continue to hold out to try to get these ACA subsidies because A, the vast majority of Americans are going to blame Republicans for the shutdown anyway. And B, if we don't get these ACA subsidies now, we are virtually guaranteed to see 20 million Americans watch their healthcare costs rise 70, 80, 90, 100%, which will mean that a lot of those people just aren't going to be able to afford healthcare. Or if they're able to afford healthcare, it comes at the expense of something else. It comes at the expense of food. It comes at the expense of housing, whatever it may be. And for those who say, well, just pass a clean CR and we'll delve into the healthcare stuff after. Do you really take these Republicans at face value when they say, "Oh, don't worry, just pass a clean CR and we'll give up some ground on healthcare later"? This is the same Republican Party that just cut Medicaid from 17 million Americans. Those are the people that we're going to trust when they say, "Oh, hey, we're totally, definitely going to sit down with you and hash out this ACA subsidy plan later." Like there are no opportunities other than this, where Democrats have any leverage. And again, because this is not reconciliation, because this is a CR and it goes through regular order and we need 60 Democrats in the Senate, that means we need 60 votes in the Senate, which means we need 7 Democratic senators to cross over. They've got some leverage now. And there are never situations where Democrats have leverage. Remember, Republicans control the House, the Senate, the White House. They've generally got carte blanche to do whatever they want to do. And so if we care about healthcare, which we do, if we care about making sure that people's last line of defense in terms of staying healthy and not, which we do, then this is the chance to actually flex our muscles a little bit and make sure that we can get this done. And short of this, we're not going to have opportunities unless you trust this Republican Party to swoop in and be the white knights when it comes to healthcare in the immediate aftermath of them screwing over 17 million Americans. Then this is the opportunity to dig in and try to get something done.
And friends, you can see why I invited Brian on to give us his political analysis, because you're not going to get any better than that. So let's finish up with this, Brian, because I always like to try to find a point of light or leave on a note of optimism. Is there anything you're seeing on the landscape right now that gives you a little bit of hope, a little bit of optimism moving forward?
Two things. One, again, the polling that I alluded to before that shows that the vast majority of Americans are going to blame Republicans for that. I think that's important because we have learned that this Republican Party is not immune to pressure. Yes, Donald Trump is an autocrat. He is an authoritarian, and this Republican Party has presented itself as complete supplicants to Trump. But they're not immune to popular pressure, and I think that's important as these poll numbers continue to show that if a shutdown occurs, that Donald Trump will be the one to shoulder most of the blame, and the Republicans will be the one to shoulder most of the blame. That, as you yourself say, pressure bursts pipes, and I think that we will see a situation where, if the blame continues to lean heavily or weigh heavily on this Republican Party, that we might see some movement. And the other thing is that with the Jimmy Kimmel situation, it shows that Democrats do have the ability to elicit some change if we can figure out how to get organized. And prior to the Jimmy Kimmel situation, even I kind of felt resigned to the fact that a lot of these companies, a lot of these media outlets, law firms, universities, whatever it may be, only felt that financial pain comes at the hands of Donald Trump and nobody else. And what that boycott against Disney and ABC showed is that, in fact, consumers and the majority of Americans can have a bigger impact to their bottom lines than just Donald Trump. And so the calculus then becomes, which is going to be worse? Is it going to be is capitulation to Trump inevitable because that's the only way that we can lessen the financial pain, or is there a worse financial pain that we can endure? And we showed that there was. And so I hope that that serves as a wake-up call to the majority of Americans who recognize, hey, if we can get our shit together, come together, organize, and do what we have to do to make sure that we can levy some pain on the people who are seeking to take unpopular positions, then we can really bring about a change that otherwise wouldn't have been able to come about before. So the Kimmel situation gives me some hope. The polling situation as far as the shutdown gives me some hope. And it's going to rely largely on people making sure that they're paying attention. The Kimmel situation was a little bit easier because that cross through the cultural Rubicon in a way that most political issues don't. Like, everybody knows who Jimmy Kimmel is. Everybody understands the very simple story of the government suppressing free speech. It's a very easy story to understand. The government shutdown is a little bit more opaque when it comes to the vast majority of Americans. So it relies on everybody here who's paying attention to this Substack Live. It relies on regular people making sure to stay on top of this issue. And when there comes a point to exert some pressure onto these people, which we can do right now, by the way. If folks who are watching this live in a state or a district with a Republican senator or member of Congress, use this opportunity to call them and say, hey, if Democrats' only olive branch here, the only leverage that they're putting on you right now is that they want to extend ACA subsidies. I rely on ACA subsidies. Why would you not vote for that? Again, it's the majority of states that have signed on to these ACA subsidies in the last 5 years are states that voted for Donald Trump. This is not a red versus blue issue. This is Donald Trump as a billionaire deciding by fiat that nobody deserves healthcare in this country because it's not an issue that impacts him because he's wealthy enough to afford it. So he's going to go ahead and pit, working class Americans against undocumented immigrants with a lie about how somehow they're responsible for this. It's just a billionaire pitting working class white people against working class brown people, and like fuck that. Like it's so clear to see what he's doing, and so we have the ability to lean on these people. So if you live in a Republican state, if you have a Republican member of Congress, go ahead and call them. They log these calls. I know it feels like an archaic a means of communication as we sit here on Substack Live broadcasting to the whole country, but the reality is they log those calls and they have an impact. And if they start to see an influx in their offices of people calling and saying, hey, sign on to these ACA subsidies, I don't want to pay more for my health care, then that's going to start to weigh on these people who have to decide whether they want to side with Donald Trump because they're afraid of the God King, or if they want to side with their own constituents who have the ability to vote them out of office.
You know, I'm with you on the Kimmel thing. That's one of the places I have found some hope and optimism because, you know, Donald Trump thinks he's big and bad, and everybody is going to sort of cower in his presence. And the man couldn't keep Kimmel off the air for more than 1 week.
Yeah.
So it proves he's not very good at this dictator thing. But it also proves that when you have Disney and ABC and even Sinclair and Nexstar, at first catering to Trump, but then when, you know, they had other concerns that were more important to them, and we know what they are, their profit margin, their bottom line, what did they do? They went against the dictator. They made a different decision. So that should also embolden and encourage, for example, the law firms who at first bent the knee. Guess what, fellas and ladies? It's not too late to make a better decision that will ultimately be in the interest of your bottom line, and it will also be in the interest of American democracy. So, you know what? If Jimmy Kimmel can do it, if Disney can do it, if Sinclair of all outlets can do it, you know what? Everybody can do it.
And I would just add, for people right now looking for something to do, and by the way, I promise you it will feel good to do something, pick up the phone after this and call 202-221-3121. That's the switchboard. You can talk to your member of Congress. You can talk to your senator. Again, the number is 202-224-3121. Call them. Make sure to leave a message. Make sure to talk to the operators there. I hope I said that number correct both times. 202-224-3121. Go ahead and call your member of Congress. Go ahead and call your senator, and it makes a difference. And they log these calls.
Yeah, call them because pressure bursts pipes. So keep the pressure on. All right, Brian, thank you for jumping on. Thank you for the expert political analysis. Thank you for your tireless voice in this fight for American democracy. And I'll see you again tomorrow.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, everybody.